Here are the books that I read in June. Except for this bottom one, I finished it up in July, but I'll explain why I fell behind on it. Editing Robin here. I didn't get a chance to thank all of my new subscribers for my BookTube newbie tag. There are so many of you, and you've all left such lovely comments. I've never had so much love on a video before, or as many people welcoming me to a community as I did with that last video, and I want to thank you all so very much. It means so much to me, and you all are very amazing. I just want you to know that. The first book that I read for the Pride Readathon was Aphrodite Made Me Do It by Trista Mateer. Looks like this. It's a beautiful cover. Now, Aphrodite Made Me Do It is a poetry collection retelling the story or being the voice for Aphrodite while also showcasing the voice of the poet through different poems and some really fun artwork throughout. Ooh, please don't demonetize me. I have to admit, I hated this book. I gave this book 2.5 stars out of 5, and it was painful to give it that rating. I love Trista's work. I read The Dogs I Have Kissed, and I really enjoyed it. I loved their book, Honeybee, which I read a couple months ago and did a review on. So when I picked this book up, I thought it was going to be amazing, and the art was just going to make it so much better. When the truth of it was, if it weren't for the art, I probably would have given it 2 stars or just 3 stars flat. I couldn't get behind the poems. They felt lacking. It felt like Trista was aiming for more of the mainstream type of poetry, with many of their poems being these short pieces and just not... I was disappointed. I didn't like many, if any, of the poems. And I think the retelling of Aphrodite's story also felt pretty flat for me. I wasn't interested in it. This is what I mean. So it has Aphrodite Speaks on Love, and then later on it has a section titled The Poet Speaks on Love. And I think I preferred the poet speaking rather than Aphrodite speaking, which is a shame because mythology retelling is usually pretty fun. But I did mark some pages, so can my art be a healing thing if I only write about my trauma and not my joy? I liked that one. There's also a poem. Let's see if I can't find it. Oh, yes. Queer Girl Overture was my favorite piece out of the entire book. And to be honest, I think it was the only piece that I liked throughout the book. I know I said I liked the artwork piece, but I don't know if you would consider artwork poetry? But yeah, I really enjoyed the last line. I have this dream where I only write you love poems, and none of them have to say, I'm so glad we're alive. Yeah, I don't have much to say for this book. Really disappointed. If you like Amanda Lovelace and their style of writing, you like this. Basically, if you like Instagram poetry and modern day poetry, you will probably enjoy this. And if you like art collages, you will probably enjoy it. I hated it. I really wish I enjoyed it. It was just, I don't know. The second book that I read in June for the Pride Readathon was Trick Me or Your Computer Screen. Now, Trick Me or Your Computer Screen is a chapbook by Rachel Crosby, published by Fifth Wheel Press. It's a big book. It's basically poems using the nostalgia of early 2000s toys to allude to trauma and mental health. So the themes and the experimental pieces are very fun. I don't know if you can see all of them. Each section has their own applicable trigger warnings, but I was excited to read this book because of the experimental way of the style the poems are in. I like when poems are formatted differently. It's very fun. Unfortunately, despite my excitement for this chapbook, I ended up rating it 3.75 stars out of 5. The issue being that I got distracted very often with reading it, and I think maybe doing a reread might help me understand the poems a bit more, but the imagery is so strong that for me, I could not focus. I kept getting lost and confused, and it's very unfortunate because I've listened to Rachel read their poems before, and I was so entranced, and that's why I bought their chapbook, because I loved when they read the poems. And I think if they were to come out with an audiobook, I would happily give my money towards it, because I think it's easier for me to understand when they are reading their poetry to me, with the flow and the expression that is needed and meant to be there for the poetry, for their poems, rather than me getting lost and trying to understand what they meant in this way that they've described an image or a scene. So, unfortunately, I couldn't love the book the way I wanted to. But I do recommend this book if you enjoy longer pieces of poetry that are more experimental on the side of format and style. The third book I read for the Pride Readathon is not a poetry book like the last two. It is instead a fiction novel, The One and the Other, by Charlie Danilo Trigueros. Now this is a fiction novel based on vampires living in a post-apocalyptic Athens, which I'm pretty sure is that city in Greece, but it's not the Athens we know of today. Like I said, it's post-apocalyptic. A very good read. It's queer, it has ace representation, which I adored because this was the very first book that I've ever read in my entire life, which hasn't been that long, I'm only 21 years old, with ace representation. And I never knew how much I needed that rep before I read this book. I cried because I finally saw myself in a book, and it was normal. And it was I loved it. This book is just amazing. I loved the way the characters were set up, the story was set up, but I also really enjoyed the way the parallels between the conflicts in this fictional world managed to attach itself into the conflicts that we have in our world, in reality, especially when it came to being queer in this novel. It was not so taboo as it can be seen here in the real world. It was more so them being vampires that was discriminated against and the taboo, but being a vampire was alluded to being queer and more of a person of color in the real world. And I want to read you some of my favorite lines. So this is what I mean by being a vampire kind of made me feel connected in being queer. I'll read the entire paragraph. It's a conversation. Gay because we have little more to lose by discovering what we are, I clarified, hoping that I sounded somewhat confident in my own theory. Non-vampire have their normalcy to lose. We don't have that luxury in the first place, or that problem, if you choose to look at it that way. And I don't know. The writing, this book is just a phenomenal work of art, and I highly recommend to anyone who likes a short fiction novel with queer voices, queer own voices, shining through. Great book. 5 out of 5 stars. I don't know if I mentioned the rating, but 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read, I am morally conflicted on, I'll explain, was Plums and Arpeggio by Seneca Basso Alto. This poetry collection reads, for me at least, more as a novel in verse, as all those poems stand alone, but they very much and very well connect together and basically form a story, whereas with other poetry collections, they all have the same theme, but they don't so much share the same story chronologically, if that makes any sense. But this poetry collection talks about love and death. Basically, it's about wanting a relationship and loving someone, but not being able to have that relationship, and then having that relationship and running from that relationship into other relationships, and then wishing you didn't run because you now have to face the heartbreak and the grief of losing the person that you loved in the said relationship. A lot of relationship. The reason I am morally conflicted with my rating, I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. The language and the writing was great. Like, I loved it. It was almost like nothing I've ever seen before. Seneca has a power with language, and you can really see her expertise shine through with her work. The only problem is I didn't like the characters, and I think that can be a good thing. I don't like the way some of the love interests seem to prey upon the younger woman in the book. It was kind of, predatory. So these are 2 lines that I really liked. They're short, but the poems are great. It's not using if you love me. I think that really sums up the whole theme of the book. Like, that's toxic. That is a toxic and dangerous mindset. It is still using. Someone can still be bad for you even if they say they love you. And I think that line sums it up perfectly. Other than that, really, really good book if you can get past it being morally conflicting. The book that I was supposed to finish and was on track to finish before June ended, but ultimately did not get to before July started, was On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. Unfortunately, the last week of June, my anxiety sent me to the hospital. So I was on track to finish this book on time, but did not get to finish it till July 3rd, I think it was. So I was really disappointed, but I did finish it, and I want to include it in the Pride Readathon recap because it would have been finished by then, and it is by a queer author about queer experiences. So my rating for this was 5 out of 5 stars. Unsurprising. Ocean Vuong, where have you been my entire life? This is a book I would sell my soul to read all over again. And it kind of makes me sad that it took me so long to read. I started it at the beginning of the year. It took me many months to read it because I wanted to be in the right headspace to read it. I didn't want to be like, oh, I have to read and read it. It's a work of art. This is the best thing I've ever read in... I think I said that about the book before, but it's a book and I love it and I recommend it to everybody. It is not so much a poetry collection. I didn't even give what it's about. So basically, Ocean Vuong is writing a letter to his mother, but his mother doesn't know English, so she can't read this. And it's very heartfelt, it's very vulnerable, and it's very beautiful. And it's poetic. So it's not a poetry collection, but the language is very much more prose-like, at least in my opinion. And there's so many good lines. So many good lines. Like, you need the background for this, and I don't feel like giving it because I want you to read it, and I want you to feel the awe from this without me having to explain it. But is this the first line I highlighted? Yes, this is the first line I highlighted. He was only 9, but had already mastered the dialect of damaged American fathers. The context will leave you speechless. Also this line. Our mother tongue then is no mother at all, but an orphan. The context for that left me speechless. I've highlighted so many. The last section of the book, I highlighted 2 parts. They say, if you want something bad enough, you'll end up making a god out of it. And the last part I highlighted, but to be seen allows you to be hunted. This page, I want to tear out and hang up everywhere. This book holds my entire heart. I want to reread it for the first time again. I want everyone to read it, and I want to talk to everyone about it and discuss how brilliant Ocean Vuong's mind is. And I buy this. These are all the books that I read. I did not read any more than this. Like I said, I got caught up towards the end of June anyway, so I probably wouldn't have been able to begin with. Let me know if you participated in the Pride Readathon, and maybe do a little recap in my comments. I'd love to know what books you read. I am always looking for more queer stories to read. It doesn't have to be from queer authors. Maybe it's just queer characters. Either way, I love it. I need more of it in my life. Yeah. I'll happily take more recommendations. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed my chaotic recap of the books that I read and loved and hated and felt okay about at the same time. I hope to see you in the next one. Bye-bye!